Good afternoon and welcome to the marketplace. Coming up this afternoon, Finance Minister-designate Ato Forson pushes for tax compliance rather than introducing new handles to help check revenue mobilization challenges.
You don't necessarily have to increase taxes before you rake in revenue. You have the handles. What we need to do is to improve compliance. I will work with the JRA, the Tax Policy Unit of the Ministry of Finance.
Also, President Mahama expected to appoint new Bank of Ghana governor once current board's term expires in the coming month.
The governor will have to be appointed by the president. The governor will have to subscribe to the ideals and the vision of the president in foreign.
Also, dollar demand surges for first month of this year, putting some pressure on cedi since last week. More details of this coming up in this next 30 minutes. And now to our first business story. Finance Minister-designate Dr. Ato Forson has revealed that he will push strongly on tax compliance rather than introduce new handles and hike rates. The nominee disclosed this when he appeared before the Parliament's Appointment Committee.
Ghana currently collects approximately 13.8% of GDP in terms of tax revenue, according to the latest data I've cited as part of the transition. It is obvious that we can do better. I've studied the Ghana economy for some time, and I can say without mincing a word that Ghana has huge potential when it comes to tax revenue mobilization. You don't necessarily have to increase taxes before you rake in revenue. You have the handles. What we need to do is to improve compliance. I will work with the JRA, the Tax Policy Unit of the Ministry of Finance, to ensure that we increase compliance and to raise the revenue as much as we can. In the medium term, it is my vision, when approved, to increase the revenue from 13.8, tax revenue from 13.8% of GDP to about 16 to 18%. That will be able to compare ourselves to our peers. I believe the potentials are out there. It doesn't necessarily mean we should increase taxes. Yes, we have obviously announced that we are going to scrap certain taxes. We'll stick to just that. But it doesn't also mean that we don't care about the revenue. We care about the revenue. And we will have to do more on revenue. But it doesn't necessarily mean we should increase taxes. Some of the taxes out there are not bringing in the revenue that it should. For example, the vetting tax is bringing in less than 50 million Ghana cedis a year. It's a nuisance tax. Scrapping 50 million Ghana cedis will not mean anything in a way that will affect the economy if you are to adjust, particularly from the expenditure side. I mean, the noise with the betting tax and all does not comprehend the imposition of such a tax. And so I believe that scrapping such a tax will not necessarily affect the forward march of the Ghanaian economy.
So yesterday, Dr. Ato Forson was really under the scope, being zoomed consistently with several questions, attempting to test whether he's indeed competent enough to handle such an enormous tax as the Finance Minister of Ghana. We already know the story of how the Finance Ministry has consistently been critical in ensuring all government policy are assessed, diagnosed, and ensure that they come to fruition going forward into various government development. Now let's go back to 2024, where various promises were made by both the NPP and the NDC before they came into the election. During the campaign season, NPP made about 184 promises in their manifesto, attesting that they are going to implement various policies. But however, the key decider was basically came to the conclusion when the NDC won. So right now, Ghana will be working with 112 policies or manifestos under the NDC. So we'll be assessing the key factors that they promised in their manifesto. But One important aspect that was questioned yesterday to Arthur Forson was how will he be handling such propositions should we come to the point where tax structures such as the abolition of the e-levy, he vividly mentioned, the COVID levy, betting winning levy, and the emission levy. That was what the NDC promised. However, what we have been seeing is similar case being promised by the NPP, but he will be in the final stage to decide what is the way forward. He expressed confidence that he will indeed come up with a few propositions which he has written about how he's going to handle the e-levy. He said, I will abolish it in my first budget because it has failed. That is his assessment, that this particular e-levy has not accomplished its stated purpose. My position on the e-levy is well known. I have written articles about it, and my position has still not changed. That is Dr. Ato Forson's position on the e-levy. So let's go to look at the numbers. What picture will it paint when we look at Ghana's overall, let's say, finances if the e-levy and the proposed taxes or levies that were proposed on the government expenditure? So taxes to be scrapped, the opportunity cost, when we take it away, how much do we lose in terms of revenue? The COVID-19 levy, when it was proposed during the COVID era, in the government's budget was supposed to give us 13.91 billion Ghana cedis. E-levy will be giving us 8.27 billion Ghana cedis, while the betting tax, when it's scrapped, was projected to give us 5.1 billion Ghana cedis. So all these monies, many have said this will necessarily give us a boost should we leave them. However, it's an election promise. Therefore, the finance minister given assurance that in his first budget, all these beautiful colored taxes will no longer reflect in the nation's budget. However, he still went ahead to let us understand that there are some taxes that are necessary should it come to the point where we need more money. It says if the road toll is the way to raise the revenue, we will raise the revenue. If you use the road toll, you have to pay. Basically, if you use the road, you have to pay. That is his proposition. However, he similarly made a point when he came on PM Express some time back, asserting that indeed the road toll is not necessary. But here is the point where he's in the hot seat, and therefore he finds the need to go by that same direction. But we'll go to an expert who will give us a clarity about some propositions that, especially what he thinks about Ato Forson's remarks during his vetting yesterday. So we'll go straight, being joined by Executive Director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Professor Peter Korte. Welcome, Prof. First, what do you make of Dr. Ato Forson's vetting yesterday?
Well, I think he was able to answer the questions that were posed to him. Although I didn't find, I must say kudos to him. He addressed the questions that came to him. But then I was expecting more. The responses should have been the how, because you want to scrap betting tax, you want to scrap this or that. How do you make up for the shortfall? And what are the specifics? You're going to ensure tax compliance. What exactly are you going to do? You know, if for instance, we have very high taxes, it's an incentive for people to evade. And therefore, what are you going to do differently to ensure that people do not, or taxpayers do not evade taxes? What compliance measures are you going to put in place? Is it the usual, where GRA officials go and harass businesses? We've seen in the campaign, and we've even seen in some cases where businesses have complained about some of these such attitudes that is not business friendly. So yes, ensuring compliance doesn't mean going to harass taxpayers, but rather educate people about the need to pay taxes, also making the taxes affordable. Our VAT rate is over 21%. The VAT rate is over 21% or more. In the sub-region, you will find people paying, countries paying 15, on maximum 18%. It tells you our tax rate is too high. It's also not structured. There are so many nuisance taxes, so many small taxes that are not harmonized. So I expect to see more of this discussion or more questions posed to him as to the how. But for that kind of question did not come. And of course, he answered the questions that came to him.
Now, speaking about a fiscal aspect, he indicated the establishment of an independent debt management committee. What do you make of that idea? I've heard you consistently push for independent fiscal council. Does that in any way correlate in handling our fiscal policies?
Yeah, this is something that was proposed. I think we had an economic dialogue with the Minister of Finance, and as part of the communique, we said there should be an independent fiscal council. We should also legislate a debt ceiling, because we have a council, but if there's no debt ceiling, they could spend beyond the threshold, and that can pose challenges, like what we face in the immediate past where there was debt exchange and all that. So they should go beyond just forming or establishing a council. It should be independent, of course, but that council should have a debt ceiling and make sure we monitor government borrowing to stay within the sustainable threshold.
Prof, what do you make of the appointment of by the president of choosing possibly a Bank of Ghana governor or various CEOs of state institutions who possibly must align with the government's structure and plan?
Well, once the appointments are within law, I have no question about that. But the existing CEOs, and of course, if you want to terminate the appointment, there are legal procedures to do so. I believe they all have contracts, and within their contract, there are termination clauses. So the labor law allows you to terminate employment contracts with people, provided you follow regulation, provided you give them notice, provided you pay them in lieu of notice. I mean, there are clear steps of doing so, but not pushing them or forcing them out of office without any clear due processes. That one I do not support. But otherwise, you also need people who would align and support your vision. If you have somebody who doesn't support your vision, that person can undermine your efforts at achieving whatever you have promised Ghanaians or people who voted for you. And therefore, you want to do that and have people who you think are competent, first of all, and also would help you promote your agenda, execute your agenda successfully. But then it has to be done within the context of the law.
In terms of debt management, our debt was hovering around 200 billion Ghana cedis. Our debt now is hovering around over 700 billion Ghana cedis. What debt burden ahead of the designate finance minister Atoforson will you propose? Should he focus on both external and domestic, basically?
I would advise the finance minister to look at the IMF program, very comprehensive and detailed. And within that program, our target is to achieve a debt ceiling of 55% in the medium term. So he should have a strategy to gradually reduce the debt burden to 55%, that is debt GDP ratio of 55%. Currently, we are borrowing quite significantly from the money markets at very high interest rates, and I am a bit uncertain and a bit worried that if we are not careful, that market would also crash because we are borrowing at a rate that is very high, and government, if not careful, might not be able to be. So they need to work carefully and strike a delicate balance. There's a need to borrow, but also borrow within reasonable limits. The interest rates on some of these money market instruments are very high, and if we don't invest them carefully to get good returns, we may have a problem in the immediate future. But having said all of this, I think there is a threshold. There's even a discussion of following the ECOWAS threshold about 70% debt GDP ratio, but that is too high. I think if you work between 55 to 60% debt GDP ratio in the next couple of years, that should be fine for us. There is a debt restructuring exercise that has not been completed, and if he works diligently with it, I am sure we'll be able to reduce the debt and also attract moves from other bilateral and multilateral donors.
Amazing. Professor Peter Quarter, we appreciate your time here on the marketplace. Now, away from that, in a related development, Finance Minister-designate Ato Forson has revealed that President John Mahama will appoint a new Bank of Ghana governor once the current governor's term expires in the coming months.
Mr. Chairman, it says the following shall apply to the governor of the Bank of Ghana. He shall be appointed by the President, acting in consultation with the Council of State for a period of 4 years. Mr. Chairman, the governor will have to be appointed by the President. The governor will have to subscribe to the ideals and the vision of the President in foreign exchange, the foreign exchange management. The President has a social contract. He signed a social contract with the people of Ghana. His appointment or his appointee must reflect exactly that. And so, Mr. Chairman, we have not had the same constitution talking about the mandate of the central bank says that the President must appoint the governor.
Now, moving on, demand for dollars by businesses has picked up strongly for the first month of this year. The development has put some fresh pressure on the Ghana cedi since last week. There was more in this report.
The local currency opened this year still trading around 14 cedis 70 pesos. It has been hovering around this rate for quite a while. The cedi has been fairly stable against the dollar for about 2 months since last year. It's even in some cases appreciated against the dollar during that period. However, over the past 1 week, the pressure has intensified. Majority of the commercial banks were selling the cedi at around 14 cedis, 83 pesos as at last Friday. Some of the commercial banks have linked it to the surge in demand by businesses that are trying to restock for the year. Data seen by Joy Business showed that demand is coming from the energy and manufacturing sectors. But some of the commercial banks are linking it to the limited supply of dollars from the Bank of Ghana since the beginning of this year, and that the situation can be contained if the support improves. But we should also not forget that the cedi's pressure in the first quarter of each year has also been a perennial issue.
We'll be back after this break with a Joy Business Advisory series. Stay tuned. On the first session of our Joy Business Advisory series, we'll be delving deep on effective tax planning and how businesses can effectively take advantage of this to enhance their operations. Joining me to have this discussion is Mr. Gilbert Yurinchi Ado. He is the Senior Manager for Tax and Regulatory at Deloitte Ghana. We'll go straight to the conversation and basically understand what it entails as we run our business in the year 2025. Hello, Gilbert. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Winston. I hope you're fine, and good afternoon to your dear listeners.
Amazing. It's good to see you too. I like your suit, you know.
Thank you very much. I tried not to be that formal as you've been, but it is what it is.
It is what it is,
yes,
indeed.
Yes,
now,
yes.
when we speak about tax planning, what does it entail and what is it about?
I mean, tax planning is very simple. It basically focuses on how you structure your transactions so that you can then have maximum tax savings, and then you try as much as possible to pay less taxes. And all of these are legitimate within the remit of the law. One thing we always have to have at the back of our minds is that taxation is a matter of law, and I always say that where accounting ends, taxation starts. So if you structure your transactions very well, you're able to plug in into some of the loopholes, let me put it that way, that are within the laws to make some tax savings.
Now, you made mention of loopholes that are within the law. Can you enlighten us as to some of the opportunities available for businesses with which they can capitalize on these loopholes?
Great. So one thing we all have to understand is that when it comes to tax planning, two key indicators are important. We have tax evasion, and then we have tax avoidance. tax evasion is a deliberate criminal activity to avoid taxes. But tax avoidance focuses on looking at some of the measures that has been set out in the law. So as you rightly put, some of the measures that have been set out in the law, for instance, we have what we call location incentive. If you are into manufacturing and you manufacture or your business activities is within Accra and Tema, location incentive, your tax rate is 25%. However, if you so happen to find yourself to be located in areas that are within the regional capitals, you have a tax rebate of 75% of 25%. So meaning that your tax rate is 18.7.5. If you find yourself elsewhere other than the regional capital, you have a 50% rebate, meaning that your corporate tax rate is 12.5%. So this is what we term as location incentive, where you find yourself to operate drives the kind of incentives you get. But this is purely for manufacturing. And then we have what we call temporary concessions. These are concessions that are given to those who are into cash crop, agro-processing, and then tree crops, waste processing, to mention but just a few. Now, they have a tax concession of paying a corporate tax rate of 5% within the period of the concession. And the concession varies from 5 years to 10 years, meaning that within 5 years to a 10-year period, the tax rate that you'd pay is 5%. Hitherto, you would have paid nothing, but due to revenue mobilization, the rate was increased to 1% and later increased to 5%. However, after the concession period, if you are still into manufacturing, you also have a further temporary concession that lasts for a subsequent 5-year period. So for that, if you are within Accra and Tema, you pay a tax rate of 20%, and the industry concessions are specifically for temporary concessions are specifically for certain kind of business activity, which I've already alluded to, just to mention but a few because of time. So if you find yourself in the other regional capitals other than the Northern Savannah Ecological Zone, your tax rate is 15%. And the definition for the Northern Southern Ecological Zone is as defined by the Savannah Accelerated Development Authority Act. And because of time, we can't go into this.
Absolutely.
Great. And then if you are in other regional capitals, you have a concession, tax concession reduced to 10%. And then the Northern Savannah Ecological Zone, 5%. So after the, let me say, the main temporary concession, you still have another 5-year period of tax concession that is made available to you.
I like the way you put it.
Yes.
Now, that is from the bigger corporations perspective.
Yes.
Now, when we look at the SMEs and those small and medium-scale enterprises that basically operate not just in the capital, but basically in most parts of the region, for instance, the northern region and stuff, are there some provisions for them to capitalize upon?
Unfortunately, you could see the drive based on how the tax law is structured. It's geared towards manufacturing. So for those who find themselves in those sub-regions, we have what we call the Young Entrepreneurship Tax Incentive. These are tax incentives that are given to young people who are below, or they are up to 35 years and below. And you're expected to be in this stream of business activity. Manufacturing, information and communication technology, if you're into agro-processing, energy production, waste processing, tourism and creative art, horticulture and medical plants, as well as, basically these are the stream of the activities. And you are granted a tax exemption for a period of 5 years. If you find yourself in any of this region and you're a young person who is 35 years and below, what are the steps that you'd have to take? You just have to notify the Revenue Authority with the requisite documentation to show that you're a young person who is into this business venture for you to be able to take advantage of this tax concession. Other than that, I always say that the best form of tax planning is to comply. And 3 cardinal pillars when it comes to taxation: your reporting requirement, your filing requirement and your payment requirement. And all these things are back with sanctions.
That was Gilbert Addo giving us up-to-date on effective tax planning for business operations. So we'll bring you up-to-date information on the Joy Business Advisory Series here on the Marketplace throughout the bulletins. So that's all for business here on the Marketplace. My name is Winston Taki. Have a good business day. Bye-bye.